Let's talk today about the P110 120, and what this is a complete overview of the product so that when you buy it or you use it, you have a reference to every single feature that's on the list. Everything that I know about it will be shared. And so today we're going to talk about the P110 in particular is this specific camera, but the only feature difference between the two is the optical lens, essentially. And so we will be talking about firmware 112, which at time of recording is the latest thing that I got put on this camera, but 112, which includes the Silicone 2 update. And so we'll go over that feature as well. Briefly, but we'll go over that feature. So let's get started. 110 is a great little replacement when we're talking about the 100 series. It is the next in line to the P100 series, the original P100. And so this P110 is kind of the next step in that generation, but it comes with some additional features on board, like the Mohawk tally light and the little LCD screen that differentiates it from the P100. Now, the 100 also had a different form factor. It did not look like this. It was had a little bit more like a barrel lens on it and what have you. This is more compact and in line with the design from BirdDog products up to date. So this is a great little example of us trying to listen to our customer base, listen to what it is that they want, and also then create a product that is more in line with those feature requests. And so first and foremost, you're going to notice on the front of the camera, there's a little LCD screen. And on that LCD screen, it's going to tell the short name or MDNS name or however, the identifier name for your network. It's going to tell the IP address. It's going to tell what resolution the camera is working in. And it's going to, I think those are actually the main items for that list. It's going to tell those items at all times. It'll show that at all times. Now, there is an option where you can turn that off if you're in a security situation. We can look at that on the web UI in a few minutes. But generally, for troubleshooting, it's really helpful to see what the camera's doing. And if that screen is supposed to be on and if it's off, it's a clear indication that you may have an issue with the product itself. And so great little troubleshooting tool, tells you what the IP address is, tells you what the short name is, so you can find it on the network, and it makes it very simple to interact with. And folks have been we've had some very good feedback about that and positive kind of reinforcement for those changes for adding that screen. The other thing you'll notice is that on the top here there is a light. Now, the P100 didn't have a tally light, but the 110, 120 do, and it's what we're lovingly referring to as the Mohawk light. There is also a light on the back, which allows you to add like a number, which is like basically an indicator, and so that you can put in a little silicone, and I can try and spin it around here for you so that you can see it, but there's a little indicator that shows it here on the back. It's really hard to see that. That is an insert. There it is right there. And when the tally light turns on, that little number will light up. But that is just a simple little indicator light that you can replace the silicone things with different numbers, and you can even buy additional numbers as well. So the tally light lights up that section and the Mohawk at the top and gives you that option to have NDI metadata tally being sent directly to the camera. So super helpful there, so that talent or however you want to use your tally can be used. Now, you can manipulate the tally in really only with vMix as of today, really only inside something that can send the tally information. We have received the feature request to be able to manipulate that with an API, but right now, if you're using vMix and you select that camera, then that tally light should turn on. Now, I've turned that feature on. We'll do that in the web UI in a minute. But that is the major change for the 100 series, is the tally light and the little LCD screen. The back of the physical camera, which I will spin around here so that you can see, is the exact same as the P100 used to be. So we have our NDI IP PoE port. We have a HDMI port. We have a USB port for USB updates if that needs to happen. We also have a USB, I forget what that port's called, but it's basically a printer cable. But that enables this as a webcam, so you can plug it in via USB into the camera and into a computer, and it turns it into a webcam. And there's also an RS-232-422 port if you wanted to do VISCA control with the camera. So, and an SDI port, of course. So SDI out, HDMI out, NDI out. and UVC out, we'll say. And all of those connections are on board the camera and functional out of the box. So that is a super helpful, let me try and get this centered again, a super helpful way of connecting it to a system. Of course, we assume that you're buying an NDI camera to use it with NDI, and so that's how control is generally issued and supported and assumed, that you're going to control the camera over NDI commands like Studio Monitor or a keyboard or something like that. So, or VSCA IP even at that point. The camera does do VSCA IP, Sony VSCA IP commands as well, which means that you can use it with a broad host of other controllers. We just don't support those controllers at BirdDog specifically, but if you wanted to use a controller company like Scarhoy or something like that, they would support a protocol like Sony VSCA IP. So there's that option as well. So physically, that's basically it. It's about the same physical size as the P100 used to be, but it is a great little camera that has a great optical lens, looks really good, but also gives you a ton of features on the web UI, which is what we want to kind of go over to now. So I'm going to cut over there and I'm going to walk you through all of the features that are on this side of the camera. So I'm going to turn towards here so I can see this clearly and just give you kind of a brief overview. So this is a very familiar web UI now that we have with NDI 5. And when you load up to the dashboard, we can use the IP address. We can use the actual short name of the camera if we want to. So this system name is BirdDog-Studio-P100.local. So if I wanted to get to that there, I could do that. I could use this, and I wouldn't need to know the IP address. I just need to know the name. Also, the IP address is on the front of the LCD screen that we had talked about just here moments ago. It's listed there as well as the short name. My short name is pretty long, and so I don't know if that whole screen will fit the whole short name, but I set that name, and so I'm pretty confident in what that is. So this is the very familiar now NDI 5 dashboard that everybody is pretty much comfortable with at this point. It gives us great information, CPU usage, the actual network bandwidth that's being used. It tells us what the device mode is, obviously in code because it's the camera, and that it is streaming NDI. We have the video short name, which would be when you go into Studio Monitor and you click on this camera, it'll say cam when you pull it up. Video format, audio status. Here's the actual 1080p 5994. This is a progressive format that I'm using. Our average bitrate, this is just fed back to the web UI every so often, and so you'll see it change every now and then. But my sample rate is 422. Genlock status is not active. We don't have Genlock status. Well, we have Genlock for NDI 5, but we're not using it here. Network mode is TCP, not multicast, but we could change that. Silicon 2 protocol, this is a new line item for 112 because this is the Silicon 2 item, or firmware. So I'm actually outputting this as HX, and I'll show you that here in a minute. And then down here in system details, again, our system name, our MCU version, which is 13, which is correct. Our status is active, which means the camera assumes that it is functioning correctly. Our IP address, which is helpful, and our whole MAC address if we're trying to find it on the network. Our network speed, which is a gig, and then our firmware version and the network configuration method that we are in, which is DHCP, which is what I would recommend. So dashboard is very familiar, gives us lots of useful information. If we know what the IP address is or the short name, we can see this without even logging in. Then I'm going to click on network, which is the next tab, and it's going to say you need to log in because you haven't done that yet. And I'll say, okay, now I will jump back to the dashboard just to show you two more options. The first is device restart. If I log in, I can restart the NDI stream here, or I can reboot the device if I wanted to kind of soft power cycle. Okay, it's not a full power cycle because the power never leaves it, but it basically restarts the main board in the camera and starts everything over. This device restart restarts the NDI chip. And so if you make a resolution change or a network protocol change, you hit restart video or device restart, and it will set that up for you. If you need to do a full power cycle and let it boot up again, you would hit system reboot. Okay, the next tab is network. Here it is where I'm going to set up my network settings. And first and foremost, that BirdDog name, that system name or the short name that we use is here on that screen. So we want to type in something that is familiar. By default, it's just BirdDog dash and the last 5 of the MAC address. But in my instance, these are cameras that are operating in my own studio. And so I want to change that to something that I'll remember. Dash Studio Dash P100 works really well for me. And That's super simple, even if the IP address changes, because I'm operating in DHCP. Now, pro tip, I would prefer you to operate your NDI network in DHCP and utilize the DHCP reservation list, which on most reputable routing systems these days is included. But if you leave it a DHCP and you assign an IP address on the DHCP service, then you'll never have to change any of this stuff. Okay, this whole section can just be left in autopilot because your system is smart enough to know that, oh, that MAC address needs an IP address, and they have registered that that IP address needs to be this one. So it's a great way to know all your IP addresses, but let the system manage the packets. If you want to know more about that, we have videos, lots of videos on why we recommend those things, that configuration over a static configuration. You're welcome to check out those videos over on birddogjohn.tv. Okay, so we can change things like DHCP timeout, the fallback address. I really recommend that you don't change this because there's really no need to, and this is a great little troubleshooting step. I also recommend that you don't make your NDI network 192.168.100 because that gets confusing when you have a fallback address in that same range. But subnet needs to be 22255, and your gateway, whatever your gateway is, that also needs to be in there. Again, if you have a proper DHCP running, all of this will be self-populated. The NDI network settings then gives us the option to change it between TCP, multicast, RUDP, and UDP. My real recommendation here is TCP until you max out, and then multicast. And those are really the two most stable that I think that we are comfortable with at time of recording. And so if you're running unicast, run it in TCP. It involves having an acknowledgement packet, and it makes the network quite busy. But if you're overloading your network with NDI sources, then we really need to be talking about multicast anyways. And so that's where we would change that. We could change that here as transmit preferred method of multicast. And then you would fill in, if you have a custom multicast network, you'd fill these in. If you're using the 4250 multicast settings, these just remain the same. You don't need to change those. That's the default. Here is where we would also add a discovery server. So we would put in the IP address of our discovery server, and then we turn it on, hit apply, and then say device restart, which would then reboot the NDI chip and give us that option. And you should be watching the discovery server when that happens, and it will show it as a line item. Access configuration, this is where if we have a multi-subnetted network, not VLAN, multi-subnetted network, then you could add those additional devices on the network that are on different subnets. So if I have 192.168.1, that's this network, but then on 192.168.2, I'm running like on second floor of my office building, I'm running other sources. I could add those remote IP addresses here. There's even if you say save, it will download a little configuration file. You just use the same formatting that you get in that configuration file, and then you put it here in this list and hit upload. And that will then, if you do it correctly, it will list those IP addresses just like this. It will list them on the thing, and you know you've done it correctly, and then you're good to go there. Same thing with the NDI remote groups. So receive groups. Receive groups is a way to put things in boxes so that they just belong to groups, but they're all in the same subnet. And so if you want to learn more about NDI groups, we will have a video about that. I just recorded it. We'll have a video about NDI groups available where you can learn more about that, about the concept of that. But essentially, it's the same deal. You would download a save file. You would open that. You'd copy the formatting and put your own groups in there. You would add your groups then in Access Manager on any computer that needs to be in that group, and then you would upload that file here. And again, if you do it correctly, those groups will appear on a list right here, just like these ones. And then we would need to obviously then enable NDI groups, and we would need to add the group that this belongs to into this text box. Now, there's an update coming where this text upload is changing, and so that's why we're just generally talking about NDI groups. When it changes, it will be a fillable box, I've been informed. It'll be a fillable box that you can add it to groups and just hit save, and that will do it for you right on the web UI. So we made that request a little while ago because it was confusing to have two different sets, and so now it will all be the same. It'll all look the same, which I think is a huge step in the right direction for making things customer friendly. Okay, if you wanted to secure the network a little bit, you could add a password here. So you put in the current password, which by default is just BirdDog, all lowercase, one word. And then you would put in your new password and you type it again. That way, you are for sure changing it. You know what you're doing. Please document this information. It's really a pain to try and get into a camera that's been changed in the password. And if you don't have a system that needs to be like locked down, then consider not changing. Okay, I realize there's an open security risk, and by all means, that's why the option is here. But if you're just doing it for funsies, then that you may consider not doing that, because it's one more thing to have to kind of get by if anything goes wrong. System update is where we would click on choose file, and we would upload the .fw file to do the update for this camera here. And so we've done tons of update videos in the past. This is where you do it. You'd upload the .fw file and hit upload. This is another full-on baseboard reboot button, same one that's on the dashboard. So if you click that, the whole unit will restart the baseboard. MICU update, sometimes there is a need to do a baseboard update, and so that .bin file gets uploaded here. You'd click that, hit upload, and then there's a progress bar right here on the bottom that it will show you the progress of the baseboard being updated. And something cool that I think our Master-in-Chief got implemented was a light mode and dark mode. And so we can now change the web UI, because we were getting a lot of complaints that people were trying to manipulate these outdoors in the sun and they couldn't see the web UI. So we implemented a light mode, which basically then allows you to see things a lot brighter on a screen in the sun. So that's a great little feature. Shout out to Dan, who got that, kind of spearheaded that and got that implemented. Okay, the next tab is the AV settings setup tab, and we're just going to talk about each of these buttons. We're not going to talk about actually how to use them, but we're going to talk about what they are. There's a bunch of options here where you can, so the audio output select, if you want it to be comms, okay, for Comms Pro or whatever, you could have your audio output on this device to do that. Now, you need a USB dongle to plug into the back of the device to get audio in and out, and it comes with the camera, and so don't throw it away. But if you wanted to use the camera for comms for some reason, then by all means, you have it on a tripod that's on the floor and you want somebody's headset plugged into it, you could use comms for that, or you could loop out the actual audio that you're sending it. So you're inputting audio, and then you could loop out the audio there to listen to it as well, or to send it to a separate audio source. Your digital gains are here. These are not amps. These are just digital gains, so use with caution. And the device restart button is here underneath. That is the same that's on the web UI, which is a NDI chip restart. The OLED, this is that piece where I said you could turn off the OLED if you didn't want it to show the information. And so if I cut over here, I've turned it off, see? Click off, and then I click on, and it shows that information. So if you didn't want your IP address to be listed or your short name, you could set it all up and then hit off. Please document then, because there's no way to manually turn it on at the camera level. You have to do it on the web UI. So we turn it on. You can also invert it, which means that if you hang this camera upside down, you can invert this information so that you can still read it. Now, if you hang it in a ceiling, you might be using binoculars to see it, but there you go. It is an option. So we're going to turn it on. We're going to leave it on, and I like that very much. Such a cool little feature. Really happy they did that. All right, now there's a couple of things here. A change with the Silicone 2 option here on the AV screen. This screen you're very familiar with, NDI managed or manual bitrate. My recommendation always is use NDI managed, because the bottleneck should not be the camera. The bottleneck, you need to fix if you're manipulating the bitrate I'm sorry, here we go. If you're manipulating the bitrate in the web UI because your network can't handle it, we need to address the network thing. Really shouldn't be throttling down the bitrate here on the bitrate management and NDI video bandwidth. You should be addressing the fact that you need to do that at all. So leave it at NDI managed and then fix your network. Lovingly fix your network. This is that stream name that in Studio Monitor, if you wanted to change it to something specific, so like I could say Studio, P110 or something, but I could change the stream name and hit apply, and then when we look at it in Studio Monitor a little bit later, you'll see that. We change our video format here, so 1080p 5994, progressive is what a lot of the internet is, but most of Europe is interlaced, so there you go. NDI audio. Do you want to send audio across the NDI feed or not? This is where you turn it on for analog or for mute. Mine is on mute because I don't have any audio plugged into this. Stream to network. If you wanted to actually just turn off the NDI stream, it would just show the screensaver. But maybe we're not using this camera, but it's up in a ceiling. We don't want people like remoting in and seeing it while we're not using it. So you can actually turn off the stream, and this is an API command. So you can write this into like an X keys button or something like that and actually turn the stream off on the network when you're not using it, and then turn it back on when you are. When you turn it off, you'll see a screensaver. And if you want to change the screensaver to something, you can change it to the BirdDog logo. You can change it to a black screen, or you can change it to something of your own, a capture frame. And what you do is you point it at something that you want to capture it, and then you click capture, and that becomes your capture frame. There are future firmware requests, I'll say, I don't know about anytime soon, requests to include the JPEG upload for this, because people want to put their corporate logos up, and that's an important piece. This is where we would turn on and off the onboard tally, and as you see, mine is off, so now I will turn it on, and then I will, let's cut over now to this, and I'll load up this in preview, and there it is, green. Pretty cool that it is, it's that fast, you know, like I turn it off, turn it on. It's very, very quick. And so I really like that as an option. You just turn on the tally and it works, which is amazing. Remember, you need a metadata, NDI metadata, to send to the camera to do that. And so programs like vMix and Wirecast, TriCaster are great for that. Your Genlock source, what you can do there is you can actually affix it to the timing of a camera that's on your network. Now, this is a BirdDog support unit, and so it's here for a couple of reasons, and one of it is it's struggling to find sources, and so bear with me, but that is what we would do there if you wanted to sync it to another source on the network. Now, Genlock NDI is not Genlock traditional like you're used to. So don't get this idea that the timing will all be locked into place. That's not what it is. If you really want to learn more about Genlock on NDI, you need to read the NDI 5.5 release notes from NDI.tv for the SDK. That is where a lot of that is listed. Same thing here with the failover source. If this camera for some reason stopped transmitting and it started malfunctioning, you could link it to another source that's on your network so that it doesn't stop sending NDI. Or so, for example, we were having an issue ages ago where we were having like sources would malfunction or disappear or get unplugged, and vMix would crash. And so this was the response to that, is basically adding a failover source so that it will reflect a source and won't crash firmwares or softwares that might have, you know, an issue with that. So that's not an issue anymore with vMix, and there was never an issue with TriCaster, but Wirecast, I think, it's not an issue anymore, but it's a feature now. So there you go. All right, so then that's where you would put that failover source. You can reset. So when we hit refresh, right, we refresh it and it pings the network and it finds out what sources are on the network. You can reset that list as well by clicking reset. And then, of course, applying all that information. You hit apply here. That would do that. Oh, now, there's an advanced tab on here that we need to talk about. This is the new Silicon 2 update. When you click on advanced, you can tell it to do constant bitrate or variable, but you have to pick what protocol you want first. So if you want it to be SRT, NDI-HX, RTSP, RTMP, or disabled, when you click that, it will change the options basically for what it's allowed to do. So, for example, if I go HX, we get constant and variable. If I click SRT, it's going to change this for the SRT settings, all right? And it's going to say, like, what do you want for your GOP size, what bit rate, all this stuff in here. So it's going to give you the options to link it as an SRT caller or a listener, or even rendezvous, I believe. So rendezvous, as some people, I've heard people say. Anyways, but it gives you all the options to do the SRT connections, which is great. I personally like the NDI-HX function because it gives us an option to use this camera at a lower bandwidth, just a little bit more latency. So we can change the mode here, low, medium, high, or ultra, which is an NDI-HX3 feature. And we can say we want it to be ultra high and we want it to be, high bit rate, 50 megs. If you change this to medium, this is all going to adjust as well. So 8 megs. And it's really that fast. And then as always, I suggest going back to the dashboard and just doing a little restart device so that it restarts the NDI chip and gets it all kind of up and running for you. Okay, that's the end of the AV setup. The next tab is cam control. This is where you're going to manipulate all of your coloration options and control of the camera. If you want manual control of the actual camera, then you would click on this little wheel here, and I'll just show you. I'm clicking on the web UI and it's moving the camera. So what I'm doing here is just clicking these little buttons and it's moving it. This is not for precise movement. This is for general movement, okay? That's what this is. Now, you can slow the pan way down. You can slow the tilt speed way down. And then when you press these buttons, they are a whole lot slower, okay? This is full on over. but it's not necessarily meant to be your control panel. Studio Monitor does a much better job of controlling the camera, and I can show you that kind of in real time here. Let me snap this to this. Let's see here. Let's do like this and this. Okay, so here, see how when we move this camera, oh, sorry, the speed is like super tiny, right? Well, if we go full speed, look how fast that is. That's like ridiculously fast, right? So when we slow it down here, ba-ba-doo, ba-ba-doo, and we're going to press the now button. Now it's a fair bit slower. All right, but inside Studio Monitor, what I can do is I can actually turn these up to full, and then I can actually steer this fairly steadily with full speed. If I go all the way over, it will go fast. But if I want to just kind of dial it in and move it into position and be like precise, then I can just do that pretty simply there, and it works really well. So Studio Monitor is a great like variable control speed if you're trying to do this on a computer surface. All right, that's the best. That's probably the best way to handle that. So here, that's the initial control menu. If we need to turn on the OSD menu for some reason to get into the root file of things, you can do that here on off. But all of those options are available in the web UI, so you shouldn't need to go in there. Zoom, we can actually physically zoom the camera from here. Tally and wide. We can go focus mode full auto, or we can say manual, and then you can manually change the focus of the camera as you need to. So you can see it like getting blurry there by just clicking this wheel, and then if I hit auto and I move it, it's going to find a point to focus on, and then we'll do that. So manual, I'm going to say in there. See my computer screen, my Dell. It's like slowly dialing in. There we go, nice and clean. So that's your manual focus in and out. You can also change the speed settings to be standard, which is what I'm using, or superfine, which gives you far more granular control over the speed in which you can dial. So like we can really dial it in, and the guys put lots of steps, like 250 different steps, and that gives you a very finessed threshold, we'll say. Don't mind the hole in the ceiling. Very finessed threshold to manipulate the camera, and that's very helpful when it comes to steering around. And then the zoom speed, so like I'm on full zoom right now. Okay, that's full speed. If I dial this way down to like 2, then if I change that, look how slow that is. Okay, that's full on zooming out, so that nice and slow, a nice but that is a zoom threshold. Okay, you need to understand those are thresholds, and that's what it will go up to. So that's the manual control here on the camera control tab in Cam Control. All right, the next is the 3D options. This is a beta feature that has been around for quite a while, and so if you're into 3D, we have resources to help you kind of understand that, but this is beta, meaning that there's not a whole lot out there. It is designed to work with I think it's Unreal Engine, but these would be where you would enable that and then put in your parameters to start feeding that data over to your Unreal Engine. This is where we set the style of presets that we want to call and the actually saving the presets. The two options here is camera, meaning that we're going to save the position, the PTZ, and we're going to save the coloration of the camera. Okay, that's what that means. If you say PTZ only, when you save these presets, that will only be PTZ. Okay? It does not save, in either case, the speed in which the camera obtains those presets. Okay? It doesn't remember the speed of the preset speed. Okay? It only remembers PTZ in this situation, or under camera, it remembers PTZ and coloration. All right? You should know between the two. If you wanted to save presets, here on this spot, we would hit save. The whole thing will turn green, and then we select the number that we want to save it as. And now preset 8 is saved with PTZ only. If I change this to camera and call preset 8, it will only call PTZ only preset 8. It will not call the other, like it with coloration options, because I didn't save those, and vice versa, by the way. Okay, the next tab is exposure, and this is where we're going to set our manual exposure for our light in our studio. And so I, of course, am running in manual, but you have a few options: full auto, manual, shutter priority, iris priority, and bright. These two are semi-automatic. This is a full automatic. Bright is kind of an optional, like a more basic setup, and manual is control over every single feature. Now, I use manual. I'm using a shutter speed of 1/30 because vMix is actually only outputting 30 frames, but I could go as high as 60 if I wanted. I like to have my iris as open as possible to allow in the most amount of light, and I like to keep my shutter speed somewhere close to what the frame rate is that I'm generating in my final production, or double. So if I'm running at 1080p 30, I would try and go for 1/60. All right. So general rule, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm also attempting to run at 0 dB of gain. Okay. I don't want to introduce any artificial gain. If I have to do that, that usually means my lighting is too dark. Okay. So if you have to introduce artificial gain, if you have to manipulate this, that usually means you have insufficient lighting for the camera to function correctly. White balance is also one of those things that you can use full auto, you can use a semi-auto option, or you can use a full manual option. Obviously, auto is full auto. Indoor is a preset indoor assumption of Kelvin temperature. You can use the outdoor, which again is the opposite of indoor, but it's an assumption of what the Kelvin temperature is. One push is if you click on one push, you would click the one push button, which is up here on the right, and you would that would take a snapshot at time of request and would change the white balance to be as estimatedly close as it could be with the current shot. Automatic white is also a full auto option, which is fine, but it is a reoccurring all the time style, and some people prefer to all have the same style of white balance. The trade-off there is that's usually happens when you have too many cameras and too few operators. Okay, that's why people run in full auto. My preference is user because it gives us control of the red gain and it gives us control of the blue-green gain, the red-yellow gain and the blue-green gain, which makes things much more manipulative when we are trying to get the right color balance. And so here is your yellows and reds, and as we change that, you can see that happening in real time. And then here are the blues. And so again, we can see that happening and get it pretty close. Now I have a gray office, and so that is pretty close. And also the lights are facing the other way. So no need to manipulate this too much, but it's probably something close to this. The other manual option is basically a color Kelvin range. And so if you have a really cool office, and I don't mean like, hey man, cool office. I mean like if you have a cold color and the lights are quite blue, then you could manipulate this to match whatever that Kelvin rating is. Or if you have really warm lighting, if you have, like lamps and things like that, then you're going to have warm lighting, and then you can lower that pretty much all the way down to 2800 Kelvin, which is pretty crazy. So this office is somewhere in the 5,000 range, but I wouldn't use manual 2. I would probably use this style of white balancing because I have far more control. And since I'm in a controlled lighting situation here in the studio, my lights don't normally change. The ambient light outside doesn't really affect me at all. And so I can set this manual and save it as a preset and leave it. Okay? Preset 1, if you save it with camera settings, preset 1 will load those settings when the camera boots up. And so it's easy. Once you get it kind of set up that way, then it's easy to power things on and get started fairly quickly. So that is what I would recommend there, and really finesse this a little bit. I go over in the P200 coloration video how to think about white balance when you're using the full manual setting. It's a great little tip that you might consider, but the number one question I pose is, what do you want this to look like? Decide on that before you start messing around with this. Decide on, I want it to look colder, I want it to look warmer, I want it to look more true to form, I want, darker blacks, I want it to look more like a raw video. You decide, and then we'll work towards that solution. Okay, the next tab is more of like the fine details of the actual picture itself. And so we're going to go over to the picture tab, and we're going to talk about sharpness. Now, never operate a camera in its extremes if you can help it, okay? So like if I turn it all the way up to 15, this looks kind of what we would refer to as crunchy. Okay, this shot looks a little bit like a little crunchy. It looks a little too sharp. I like to be somewhere in the middle, 8, 10, 7, somewhere in there. Have a look at the shot and see what you think, but don't go to the extremes. Don't go all the way to 0 because that looks really soft in the autofocus. It'll always look like it's out of focus. but don't go all the way to 15 either, because that's going to look unnatural. And so you want to be somewhere where it's not noticeable, but it's nice and clean. And I find 8 to 10, maybe 8 to 12 is probably as far as you want to go. We have this amazing feature that nobody uses, where if you want the shot to be black and white, you can. If you use this, put a comment in the comment section about that. I don't know why anyone would use that. I am prepared to be amazed. Okay, so noise reduction. This is also one of those things that people don't really know too much about, but when you have too much artificial gain, you're going to see noise in the black levels of your shirts or of your set or your things that are black colored, okay? So this helps reduce that a bit, but it also slows down the image slightly. And so you really want to get the coloration correct and the ample lighting correct, so that you don't really have to worry about this. I do find that if you use noise reduction somewhere in 2 or 3, that's a good little even point to kind of just scrub the image a little bit and keep it clean. But noise reduction at 2 or 3 is probably the extreme in which you want to go. We can flip the image upside down if we want to. If you're mounting this camera upside down, you can do that here. You can mirror the image. So if you want everybody to think that your world is backwards, or you live on the other side of the planet and your toilets spin backwards, you could do that here. You could, I don't know why I said that. You can change your wide dynamic range, WDR, if you wanted to add that for some reason to your shot. I personally don't find it to be great in a studio setting, and so we turn that basically off and leave it off. We can change our saturation settings, and typically I would tell you to try and shoot down the middle to start. And so the way that I start this is I go right down the middle with these 3, and then I manipulate it from there. So I do want my saturation to be a fair bit higher, so I'm maybe like at 12 or something like that, and I would bring down the blues if this was going to be my shot. And I also want my contrast to be higher, because when this camera looks at my shirt in the light, I want it to match my P200 as best I can. So I drive the contrast up pretty high. I do leave the gamma at 0, because I find that that is not necessary for what it is that I need, the image that I want to use. I leave it at 0. So that's just basically off at this point. Last on this list is color matrix. And this is one of those cool things where you can pull colors out of the shot, but that's the way you think about this, is if I have too much green or too much blue, or I need to tone down the blue hues, or I need to turn down the actual gain or something, we can dial that back and really like mute those colors. These are just kind of all set to standard, like middle of the road right now. I haven't even really played with this too much, so this is not the way you should set it up, but definitely play with it and find out what this does to your final image. The adjustments are minor, okay? This isn't a major move in terms of coloration. The adjustments are minor, and so know that as you manipulate these items. Okay, the last tab on here, and the last thing we'll cover today, is the actual scopes option. And BirdDog has done something really cool where they have given you the ability to have digital scopes, which is an expensive feature on most cameras, for free as a part of this NDI5 update. You get scopes for free, and as you're setting up cameras, you can either have it in preview mode, or you can have in the proxy stream, or you can have it in program mode. So let's just say I'm going to turn on all my scopes, and I want to check them while I'm using Studio Monitor. Well, I can turn on the scopes, and look, there is now a histogram up in the top right-hand corner. And I can put that wherever I want, by the way. So top left, top right, bottom left, and bottom right. Just whatever is convenient for you, we can move that around. There are also options where I can change this to a waveform. I can change this to an RGB parade. And I can change this to vector scopes. So whatever you're comfortable using, if you know how to use this, and by the way, there's a lot of great, useful videos about these items available on YouTube for free. So feel free, if you're like, I don't know what he's talking about, just type in vector scope tutorial for camera, and you're going to get hundreds of videos. You might even get the one that I did. So who knows? There's one available on BirdDogJohn.tv. All right, so we can enable that on the preview mode, and Studio Monitor is running in proxy right now. How do I do that? I go to settings, video, and I select low bandwidth. So in proxy, this is what we would call preview mode. But if I turn this off, watch what happens to the vector scope. It disappears because now I'm using the full stream. Well, I could also turn on the vector scope here if I wanted to and show it on the actual program output. Okay, so this would be going out on the full NDI stream. I can even make it larger. What this is it doesn't actually make it larger per se. It makes it visibly larger, but it just basically increases the pixel sizes. Okay, so it might on full screen on a giant 75-inch look a little pixelated, but it does make it larger if it's harder to see, and so that's a very useful little tool to have. And then we can turn it transparent if we want for some reason. If you need to see what's behind it and none of these locations are good enough for you, then you can turn it transparent so you can kind of see it. It's still available for information. And then when you're done with it, you just turn it off. And it leaves that stream, that NDI stream, and you are good to go. So we give you scopes for free. When you buy a BirdDog camera, you get vector scopes digitally on the camera output itself. That's a huge plus, a huge bonus. I know that there are other cameras that can do this, but they charge for that feature. You get this when you buy a BirdDog camera. So it's a huge selling point when it comes to using BirdDog products. And then finally, we just have the logout button, which is going to take us back to the dashboard, and then we'll be required to put in our BirdDog password once again. So hopefully you have found this overview of the P110 and P120 really helpful. Hopefully that you have a good understanding about where everything is and how to manipulate things and what buttons do when you press them. If you have any questions, reach out to us at help@birddog.tv. We would be happy to give you a hand. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you guys in the next tutorial.